Welcome to the Winglang update, name to be decided. Forget everything you know about programming language for the cloud. Now, welcome your host, Eyal Keren.
Hey, what's about the cloud? How are you doing, Shai?
Great. How are you?
I'm good. It's our eighth Winglang show, and I'm excited. We have a
Who would have thunk it?
wow, it's crazy that we're doing this for the eighth time. It's pretty insane.
Yeah.
And in terms of content, we have some interesting content today. We have we're gonna start with some coding. We're gonna do.
So why am I here?
You're gonna help me. I need your help. And we're gonna do some API gateway. We're gonna show the Redis resource, which is kind of unique. And then we're gonna run some tests. It's gonna be interesting. And then we have, of course, Mark the DJ.
Of course.
And then we're gonna have a special visitor, a special guest for the show. We're gonna have Eric Johnson. Well, you know Eric, right?
Yeah.
What was it? 2 weeks ago? When were your show
Well,
with him?
time really flies. I don't have any sense of time, but you can tell me anything between 1 year ago and 2 days ago.
Got it. So you were doing kind of a Winglang with Eric Johnson. For those of you who don't know, Eric Johnson is a kind of developer advocate, principal developer advocate for AWS and for SAM. And he's going to be joining us today. We're going to have a discussion with him and Elad. And then we're going to go back, if we're going to have time, we're going to go back to talk to you about some Reddit action that you've been doing and some Q&A.
Cool.
Yeah, awesome. So we don't have Revital today. She's lonely in Amsterdam, in Cube.
I'm sure she's not lonely.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure she's not. Having fun in Amsterdam. She almost didn't board the flight. So we're gonna have you instead, okay?
Sorry, guys.
So I'm always, when I'm doing the code stuff, I'm gonna start from scratch because basically I have an empty folder here. Show this here, and I'm gonna add a new file, app.w, and the first code I'm gonna write is bring cloud.
You had me at .w.
Yeah. Exactly. Thank you, man. So Bring Cloud is the way we import. There's a lot of repetition here because a lot of people that are watching it are watching for the first time. And when I say a lot of the people that are watching, I'm not sure how many people are watching, but
That's a good thing.
yeah. So we're introducing the API gateway, which again we're going to show you how this works on a local host, and then we can actually show you how it works on the cloud. So I'm going to do let API. Sorry, it's kind of weird here. New cloud API, and the API gateway has this pre-flight API, which basically allows me to set up routes. Yep. So we got get. Let's see what we have here. Actually, we got get, patch, post, put, basically all the kind of CRUD stuff. So I'm going to do get, and I'm going to do /, and then I'm going to have an in-flight method. Tell us a little bit about in-flight method while I write the code.
So basically, as you said before, we have pre-flight, which is basically our infrastructure definitions, and then we have our in-flight code, which is like our distributed computing primitive that allows us to write code that then executes at a later stage on different machines. The thing that is special about our in-flights is that they can interact with pre-flight with resources that were defined in pre-flight and with data that is defined in pre-flight. So basically, our compiler captures everything that is needed from the pre-flight scope that runs actually on a different machine at a different time, and then it brings it into the in-flight scope, which runs on other machines when the application actually runs. And actually, if you capture, let's say, a resource like a bucket, in Wing, like you instantiate an abstract bucket basically in the pre-flight, and then in in-flight, we have the dependency injection mechanism that injects the right cloud implementation.
Concrete bucket. Yeah, exactly. So it could be an AWS bucket, S3 bucket, it could be a cloud bucket, it could be On the localhost, it could be just a folder, right?
Or even on the cloud, it can be Google Drive, it
Right.
can be Dropbox, it could
Right.
be whatever
Right,
satisfies the interface.
Right, makes sense. Cool. So this is what I've done so far. I said API.get when we're going. Let me close this thing. This is not helpful. API.get when someone get the slash, we invoke this in-flight method. We don't do it. The cloud's going to invoke this in-flight method, and we have a request, and the response is. And let's just do return hello world. Let's do return cloud.api response. And we're going to do status 200 and body hello Wingly 08. Like this. Great. And now here on the bottom, we're going to go wing it or wing run. Wing or wing run basically goes and instantiate our console, which basically runs our local local cloud simulator. And we're going to see this here live. And it's kind of neat. Let me just zoom in a little bit here and zoom out a little bit. So what we're seeing, we have the root container, and then we get the default container, which will be removed soon. And then we got the cloud API. And on the right side here, we got the interaction. Let me get this a little bit bigger. Get this a little bit smaller. And now I can go over here and do a get on this thing and send this. And I'm expecting to see hello Wingly as the response.
Wow.
I can do this, and I can also go over here, copy this, go to my favorite browser, and hit this and see hello Wingly.8. So kind of we have an API gateway, very easy. And this, the technology behind the scenes for this localhost, I think it's Express. I'm assuming it's Express. Do you know it's Express? Does anyone know? I'm assuming it's Node and Express. I don't know, but it might be. I mean,
It's definitely Node.
It's definitely Node, right? And I can go back to the code, and I can do another API.post. Let's see, post.
Actually, we can see later if we want. We can see the generated code, and then we can find out.
Yeah, we can do this. We can actually do this. Maybe we'll do this. So we go items, and we give it an ID. I'm going to create a specific item. Just going to be lazy and copy paste all of this thing here.
Yeah.
There's no reason not to be lazy. And I've added a post command, doesn't do anything. So let's just take that ID. So I'm going to go grab it from the request. So we have let varv equal request dot varv. The varv right now is an optional. I think it's an optional map. I think it's a mistake. I think it needs to be just a map. So I'm gonna if it doesn't exist, it's gonna be existing. I'm gonna just create a map of str and like this. Chris, if you're watching, should this be an optional? I think that the body is an optional, but I think that the var shouldn't be an optional.
I agree with you for what it's worth.
Okay, I need Chris to agree with me.
yeah, that's what, it's not worth a lot.
Yeah. We both need Chris to agree. Then we got this thing, and then instead of hello Wingly.8, let's say hello ID, and let's string interpolate the ID. And we're doing a post command. I'm not going to do anything. What we are seeing here is we had soup living for a second. We have kind of route variables here, so I can grab that route variable by its name and basically show it here. Okay, so let's see this here. I save this, so now I have two endpoints here. Got the post, and I can do Eyal, and I can send this, and I'm going to get hello ID Eyal. Make sense?
Yeah.
Love it. So this is Cloud API. Yeah, thank you for. I'm just a presenter here, but who did it? Actually, this is an interesting resource because it was done. The cloud one was done by a community member, I think, and then the sim one was done by kind of a Monada team member, right? Is that correct? I think so. Awesome. So I'm just a messenger, and I can also do here. Oh, this is interesting actually. Hassan did this. I can also do this wing compile. Oh no, I got mistaken. Minus tf aws, and give us this file, and this will compile this. This will compile this to
AWS.
Yeah, to AWS, And if we go over here and look at the TS WWF, you can see that eventually what we're creating here is an API gateway. So we get the API deployment, and we're going to see this in a couple of minutes, I think. Here is the API gateway, and this is basically a Terraform file. And I can Terraform apply and Terraform deploy this, but this is basically an API gateway. Yep. Very, very simple. On the local host, it's kind of an express thing.
You can see the simulator target.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going here, I'm closing this one, I'm going to app.wsim, and I'm going to the wing, and I can see the actual code here. It's probably going to be somewhere around here. It's going to be hard for me to find it, but do you know where I'm going to find it?
Preflight.js?
Where is it? Oh, sorry. Okay, great. So we have a lot of code, Cloud API, Oh, it's not going to be here. It's going to be in the SDK. So we're not going to see the Express implementation. We can go and look for it, but it's not going to be here. It's basically referencing the SDK. See, it's importing the SDK. Awesome. So this is one thing I wanted to show, but the other thing is this is kind of, we've seen buckets and we've seen Cloud Functions. It's quite similar. It's the same implementation, but the next thing that we have on the list is basically bring Redis, which is kind of different. And it's different because, first of all,
different level of complexity.
Yeah. So I'm not going to bring Cloud. This is kind of an experimental API, so it's going to be bring Redis. And I want to show you one thing. I have Docker running here on my machine, and I have nothing inside the Docker. And I'm going to do let r new redis.redis. Awesome. And this basically, on the local host, now I have a Redis database running on the local host. When this will be deployed to AWS, it's going to use Elastic Cache. And we can see that we're going to see this later. And what I'm going to show, I'm going to post this ID inside a Redis set, kind of. So I'm going to take this ID, I'm going to do r dot, and this is the in-flight API of the Redis, which gives me kind of, if you guys know the Redis API, we have add, set, hset, smember, and I'm going to do hset. I'm going to give it the item name, items, and I'm going to give it the ID. This is it.
So you were talking about the in-flight API. Maybe we can see the pre-flight API.
Yeah, I don't know why I'm with my own. So that's the only. There's nothing in the. There's nothing in the.
But that's like amazing. Like imagine that you put you wrote R here, and then you saw all of the different APIs.
Right.
It would have been really hard to understand what happens.
Right.
So I don't know. That's one of my favorite Wing features.
Yeah, I understand why. It's a cool feature. So what I've done here, let me not do this for a second, just for the fun. Let me see what's going on the console when I've done this, because I basically have a Redis running here. As we can see, if we can see. And if I click on the Redis, I have, let me put this a little bit bigger. If I click on the Redis, I have a terminal that allows me to, I'm using here is sysadd. This is a Redis command. I'm going to give it items, and I'm going to say ayad. And this is just Redis. And if I go and say smembers, members of items. So this is just Redis. It's going to give me this. I'm going to do shy, and I'm going to run this again. So this is, I'm kind of moving fast, but our console allows you to interact with your Redis, which is awesome, I think. Let me get this a little bit smaller here. So
that's actually the first time I'm seeing the console interaction with the Redis.
Yeah, it's very cool. It's pretty cool.
Amazing job, guys.
Amazing job to Paul and for the console team. And also we're seeing the console first time in dark mode, which is also great. So this is the Redis. I haven't done anything with the Redis, so I'm going to add the item here, and I'm going to do another API get. Let's go over here, and I'm going to do API get, and I'm going to take items, and I'm going to go to r.smembers, this command. I'm going to give it the items, and this will return an array of strings. So let's do let items equal this thing, and let's just print instead of the body, print the items here.
Cool.
Okay, great. So I saved this here. Everything got reloaded. I have to do this again. Let's see what we have here. So on our API gateway, we have those three. If I go and hit the items one, I'm going to hit send. I'm not going to see anything here. So this is nice. Let's do this.
By the way, that's because when you recompiled the code, when you clicked save,
Yep.
the application was redeployed and state was.
Yeah. I mean, right now, Redis, our buckets they do not maintain states between compilation. I'm assuming that in the future that's going to change. We're going to have the option because kind of as a developer, you don't want your MongoDB or your Redis database.
But by the way, you had in the pre-flight, you had the property is stateful. So
yeah, there's something about that kind of gives you the information. And if we go over here, and I'm going to hit this thing with items, and it's empty, as you can see. And now I can go. Everything's cool, guys? Should I do anything?
Complaining about the sound.
Oh, really? Okay. So I'm doing post. I'm
Probably
going
my
to do.
fault, so.
Who is complaining about the sound?
The audience.
Who is the audience? Oh, it's going to be a weird name. Sabo. Okay, let's do Sabo. We're adding Sabo here. I'm posting Sabo into the list, and I'm posting complaints. I'm not sure it's going to be complaints.
complaints.
Was I wrong? I have a lot of typos. We're gonna live with it, and then I'm gonna hit a refresh here and Sabo complains. Okay, this is it. About the sound, we're not gonna do all of it. I can go back here. I can basically go back and show the S members. I can do all of that, and I think it's pretty awesome. By the way, we saw the Docker. Let's run the Docker PS again, and this is basically what's running. There's a Redis image that's running on my Docker. And it's running it, and once I close my console, I'm gonna hit this command again, and it killed it. So, oh my god, that's awesome.
Yeah. Amazing work, like by Yoav and by Paul, and wow.
Yeah,
on both ends, like back end and the console.
And we have Hassan here.
With the VPC.
Yeah, we have Hassan here. Said okay. So now.
Hassan actually did the hardest.
Yeah. We said now let's just deploy this into. Redis in AWS. It's Elastic Cache. Let's just deploy this to Elastic Cache. That should take like 5 minutes. Let's just make sure. And then Hassan kind of opened that can of worms and found out that on AWS, Elastic Cache can only run in a VPC. That means that the cloud function needs to also run in the VPC. Now that's a lot of hard work that for me as a product, I don't care about that because he was able to pull it off. So if I go over here, I have a version of this already. If I go over here and compile this, and I go to cd target app dot tf AWS, and I do.
Eric Johnson says that he could have told us that the VPC.
Okay, so maybe he should have told us that. No, actually, I prefer not to know about this.
As a product.
Yeah, this is not my responsibility. I can go in the Terraform init and Terraform apply, but as Eric knows, Terraform apply for a VPC, it will take a long time.
Eric doesn't know anything about Terraform.
Doesn't know about Terraform?
It's CloudFormation.
But okay, so CloudFormation faster?
No.
Okay. Oh, slower. Okay. So it's gonna take a while, but I do have I've prepared in advance kind of the setup. So we got
Sam.
Okay. Yeah, but Sam doesn't use CloudFormation. It uses CloudFormation. Okay. So I've prepared this in advance. We have the API gateway here, which is kind of nice. I didn't see the API gateway before. We can actually see that I have the post and the get here. I can go over the post and I can actually run this code. Oh, I don't remember where was the one. Okay, I can actually go over here. This is the URL, and let's hit this URL with items. And it should be empty, but maybe I've already put something in there. Come on. Okay, so I already did Tzuf, Eyal, and Eyal. I can go into my. I can do curl.x post, I think, post, and add item and do Eric, right? And let's do this. Let's hope I remember everything correctly. I said everything is the same. Item was added with ID Eric, and if I go back here, the same code that runs on my cloud runs on my
Simulator.
runs on my simulator, runs on my cloud. So let's do this here. And this is amazing.
Yeah.
This is amazing. I should have added a reset, clear the items, but I haven't done that. So this is Redis. Any questions about Redis?
My jaw is on the floor. I mean, it's
So it's all a build up to the real Joe. I mean, for me, the real Jawbreaker is coming right now. But I mean, this is the expected stuff of the project. We wanted this to work, and it is working as expected. It's still pretty amazing. I didn't think we're gonna have kind of things activating containers, setting up. I didn't think we're gonna get to this point so early, and kudos to Yoav that took this on him. But the next part I'm gonna show, it's I don't know what to tell you about that.
Chris is asking where the IAM permissions get configured.
Where does the IAM permission get configured? So first of all, he knows. So this is the first thing. So we have so let's look for IAM here. So we have the IAM roles. We have AWS IAM roles here. By the way, I don't think it's going to be the right IAM permissions because we're not doing this.r here because we have a bug here still because of it's going to be kind of permissive permissions for now. But basically, we can see that automatically the compiler goes, look at the code because kind of he knows Wing code, and when it generates the Terraform file, basically you got the policies here, and all of the policies are here, and it's the minimum. I mean, it's going to be the minimum for all cases, right? For this solution, the least privilege permissions, exactly. And we got the VPC here. It's kind of magic. It becomes too complex.
It's awesome. Like I cannot write this Terraform configuration.
I can write it. I can click on AWS. I can find my way and click on AWS, but that's an anti-pattern. Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy. There's 600 lines here for this thing, which is kind of nice. We have an API gateway and Redis. It's quite a lot. You can do a lot with those two things.
Yeah, like if you told me without Wing, I want you to develop this thing, and I had to learn the VPC stuff and everything, and Terraform, and wow, it would have taken me so much time. And every time I would have wanted to test it, it would have taken minutes, lots of minutes to deploy, only to find out what's wrong with it.
Exactly. And your experience as a developer would be much worse. You wouldn't have localhost experience, and you wouldn't be able to run tests. And we're going to show this in a second. You wouldn't be able to use the console. There's a lot of value behind this thing.
Yeah.
So initially, I wanted to use to show this example, to continue the example with adding tests to this. But because the Redis stuff takes a lot of time to deploy in AWS, it's not a good idea. So I'm going to clear this file, and we're going to go through another topic that I wanted to show. Is basically our ability to run Wing tests on multi-cloud. So both on the simulator and on the cloud. And I'm going to do a very simple kind of solution, but again, it's going to show the value here. Great. So bring cloud. Let's start again. Bring cloud. And I'm going to do two tests on a bucket. So let's do let b equal new cloud bucket. And let's do new. And now I'm adding two tests. So adding a test right now in Wing is basically creating a cloud function that has a name test column something, right? Yeah. New cloud function. And I'm going to in-flight. Oi, sorry. Great. And that's a Jewish.
Oy vey.
Oy vey, yeah. Mel Brooks, oy. Get and put and get. I'm going to check that the bucket actually works, that I put something and get it. Okay?
Yeah.
Yep. So I'm going to do
basic.
Yeah. B put file.txt and then txr, and then I'm going to do some content, great. And I'm going to let actual equal b.get file.txt. And then I'm going to do assert actual equals some content. I'm gonna make an arrow just to make sure that it's to see the test fails.
Isn't Chris going to ask Eyal that you're missing some await here before between the put and the get?
Yeah, this is I want to tell you, Elad, that the idea to remove await by far the best idea. I mean, it's so nice to write
thinking
code.
about it.
Yeah, it's so nice not to write code like this. And I'm invoking this. I'm invoking it.
Griffhammer is saying the local simulator is incredible value. It has been one of the things that have been difficult for me to find solution that is anywhere near as convenient as it is in Wing.
Wow. I'm not sure. I'm not sure someone beside us was able to hear you. But I mean, were you? Okay, great. So, but I think that the local experience is crazy. I mean, our ability to pull it off will be crazy. So I've run those tests, and it was compiling to the simulator. This is a hint to what we're going to see in a second. And there was a mistake here because I didn't do the T here. I like to see my tests fail before they pass. And now they work, and I'm going to duplicate this test, probably like this. Yep, great. And I'm going to use the same file. I'm going to put some content. Let's call it content 1. You know what? Let's do this content 2 here, not to break the test. And then instead of doing this, I'm going to do list. List basically kind of give me all the list of files here. And I'm going to do actual dot length.
So now an advanced question: what length would you expect here? Because you have two test methods.
Okay.
Right, two test functions.
Right.
Each of them puts something in the bucket.
Yeah.
So what happens?
Right. So
What if both of them run at the same time? One runs before the other.
Right. Good one. And we're going to see this in the. First of all, let's see whether this. So I did length start equal 1, and let's run it. If they run in isolation, this test is going to pass, right? And any time it's the second one, and they run in isolation. This means that you know what? Let me even check this. It means that when this thing starts, the b.list .length needs to equal 0. And although it runs after the put and get, because it's isolated, this thing passes. And that's an important feature of our test. They all run in isolation. And it's kind of magic here, but we're going to see how the magic happens when we're going to do something even nicer here.
You want to show the console?
Yeah, why not? So let's do wing it. Don't show the test. I mean, when we're going to deploy this to AWS, it's going to be we're going to be able to see it. We're going to actually be able to see it.
Okay, so
Yeah.
gonna stay quiet for now.
Right. So kind of not quiet, but
Quieter.
don't do this tell. I mean, just so we're not seeing those tests. I mean, and we can click here and we actually can see the test and how they interact with the bucket. And these are the two tests. But I can go over here and I have the new test section, and I can just run them, both of them here. And I can see that they pass. I can run one of them, and let's break one of them just for a second, and save this, and let's run both of them, and you see that it fails. And I can go and run it, and I can actually, after it runs, I can go to the bucket and see what happens here. I have some content too, and that's why the length is not run. I can actually debug the test. I can debug the state. Awesome. And now I have those two things running and passing right now. Let's make sure that it passes. It really needs to kind of run on compile. And I can do wing test. And now it's running on my local host. By the way, no mocking was required, right? I mean, it's kind of similar when you do test in Java, you don't mock the string, you don't mock the array, you don't need to mock those stuff because these are the first-class seasonal language, you don't need to mock them. Now, I want to see what happens when I run them. The same test, I'm going to add a target, and I'm going to tf.aws, and I'm going to run the same exact test because I want to make sure that this is running. I mean, this is kind of checking the bucket, which is kind of Wing responsibility to make sure that it runs similar on all on all clouds, but my application, I want to make sure that my application runs similar on all clouds. So I'm going to run it on TFWS. And what's going to happen right now, it's going to take some time. So the first thing is compiling to TFWS. Let's zoom in here. Let's get this thing smaller. And I'm going to go, and now it's doing Terraform init. I'm going to go over here. I'm going to hit the refresh. This is my buckets in S3. There's only one bucket here, which is remaining from what we've seen. We don't care about that. Forget about it. Now it does Terraform apply. Now I'm going to have, I should have one bucket here, but there's also the bucket of the actual code. So I'm going to have two buckets. But instead of having two buckets, so this is the code bucket for the Lambda function. Now I have two buckets here, which are basically, this bucket basically gets deployed twice. I'm going to do, I'm going to run this again and say as my single bucket. And I'm going to do this again. I'm going to allow Terraform destroy to destroy this. By the way, what have we seen? We've seen compiling, Terraform init, Terraform apply, setting up test runner, running test. Those two tests were running on the cloud. Both of them passed, and now it did Terraform destroy. So it left the system the same as before. I'm going to do this again, because this is magic to me. We've written tests, run them kind of instantly on my localhost, and then we were able to run them on any cloud provider. Right now, the only available cloud provider is TF AWS. And actually, no, there's also AWS CDK, right? And
it won't work on GCP and Azure? We don't
no,
have the cloud because we don't have the bucket.
I don't. Actually, maybe this will work, but I'm not going to try it right now. I'm not going to try it right now. I mean, I don't have the. Oh, yeah, it's not going to work just because I haven't tried it. So now we have my single bucket. We've seen it twice here. So it's not a single bucket, and if we're going to go over here, if we're going to refresh, we're going to be able to see that the file will exist because it's running the test. So it's doing Terraform apply. Now it's running the test. I'm hitting refresh, and I'm able to see the file. And if I go and open it and download it, I'm going to see the same content that we saw before. And the test running, and this is it. We have tests that are running that to make sure that your application is guaranteed to work, you are able to use this Wing test command in order to make sure.
So how do I debug what happened if you do Terraform destroy right after the test runs? So if a test fails.
Right. So I think that if a test fails, it's probably the best thing will be to not do Terraform destroy. It's not what we're doing right now. I think I think it's a good call out. I think right now we're doing this. If it's going to do Terraform destroy anyhow. But debugging is also something that we're gonna put more work into it, especially in this scenarios where it's basically kind of running it not in production. This is Wing test. Thank you, Chris, for doing this. Thank you a lot.
Thank you, Chris.
Yeah. Awesome. So we covered our three main topics. I think it's time for kind of a quick reflection before we go and meet Eric. Do you mind pinning Eric that we're gonna meet in? I think a quick refreshment. We're gonna move into our the one and only Mark the DJ. Nadav. Awesome.
Hey everyone. I don't know if I've said it before, but one of my favorite parts about doing this is going through music I already love listening to on Spotify and seeing if it has a cool music video. And sometimes they're really great. Either they're really funny or really beautiful. This is one of those times where the video's fine, but it has just about the worst quality you can get on YouTube. So I'm very sorry to be assaulting your eyeballs with 240p. But I think the song is really good and worth listening to. So here's Grand National's Drink to Moving On.
Sorry, I was listening to Mark the DJ. That was pretty cool. I missed part of the API. The how you got to set the API up. I caught that second part because I went and grabbed some lunch real quick. So I'll have some questions, but it looked pretty cool. The Redis and the tests are really cool. So I did catch those. Very cool. Y'all are going fast.
some of us haven't seen this whole thing integrated yet. Like you're building these features, and then one of the things that we're doing with this quirky show that you've joined us for is a really interesting opportunity for us to kind of like take a second and kind of
huddle.
Yeah,
this is what
like-
we have right now. This is what we can present. It's kind of a
snapshot.
Yeah, an extreme demo day in a
Yeah.
way. In a way.
Yeah. Other than that, I don't know that we have too many people watching this, or we're trying to figure out what it.
I'm gonna tell y'all we're live, just so you know.
So hi Eric, what's up?
Yeah. Hey, how's it going? I just checked the Twitch feed. I'm like, oh, hey, my face is big there. So, there we are. So, how's everybody?
Very good, very good. It's really fun to have you here. Thanks for joining. We're just hanging out the other couple of weeks ago in your show, in your real show.
It's off air now. I've been kicked off. No, I'm just kidding. I only had those 6 episodes, but yeah, we got to hang out. I was super thrilled to talk about Wing. I and I know we'll probably talk more about this, but I love what y'all are doing. Obviously serverless. If this were building containers or EC2, this would be an entirely different conversation, and I wouldn't be smiling. I would be, But although those would be, obviously containers, Fargate, things like that are going to be interesting to see how you implement that, and I think you should.
Definitely.
But I love the idea of making it easier for developers to build serverless. The mind shift, because you hear people talk, and I'll try not to go too long because all you said was how are you doing, but the mind shift of building to serverless is not just an architectural change. It's you have to change the way you think, and so by making that easier, I love it that y'all are doing that. So.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's all coming from the same place, right? Like I've been at AWS and built some serverless stuff, and the CDK was a result of that pain. And,
Built a thing.
Yeah, built a thing, and that's where we met. And I was actually thinking that I don't know too much about your story, so we were just talking that maybe it would be kind of interesting to hear about your journey.
Yeah, it's pretty much like any other developer, pretty much the same. So,
Okay.
I don't know how far you want me to go back, but yeah, I'll. I was born in Phoenix, Arizona. No, I won't go that far back. But which, having been to Israel, looks a lot like Israel as well. But just same kind of climate, desert, things like that.
Right.
We just don't have like the huge Mediterranean there. So
Camels
that's
everywhere.
Camels everywhere, exactly. Yes. So I tell you, I started doing tech. I've always kind of done it on the side. I remember, and I made this joke here a while back, but I was around when they introduced tables into HTML. I'm thinking, man, that is the coolest thing ever. I remember the blank tag, those kinds of things. Yeah. But I had kind of gotten into it. I was working as a day operator at a financial institution, and I ran. Let's see how old y'all are. I ran AS400s.
AS400, do you know what
That's
it
a
is?
mainframe, right?
It's a mainframe?
It is. It's an IBM mainframe,
See, I'm
still
old enough.
in use.
Still in use.
Yes, you are.
in
Yeah,
use,
you're
yeah.
right. So I know you're old enough because we both shaved behind the bald and gray.
Shaved
Yeah, exactly.
our
So,
age.
that's right, exactly. But then I was studying. This is something a lot of people don't know. My background is actually theology. I've studied for a master's of divinity at seminary, and so that's where the speaking comes from. I used to speak every weekend, and I was more focused on youth and college and those things like that. But again, I always did tech on the side. It's kind of funny. Every church I ever worked at, the minute, like anywhere else, the minute they find out you do tech, it's like, oh, hey, you're going to put a website, you're going to get a file server working, you're going to manage the email. And so I've done all of that. But as you know, or as I've said before, I have 5 kids.
Yeah.
And so I had to step down. It was just no dramatic story of, I'm mad and leaving the church, anything like that. I'm actually still very involved in my church and love it. And but then I decided to kind of make a run for tech, as a full-time job. And so the first job I ever got full-time tech was I was a designer. And,
oh, really?
And Yeah. I was horrible.
Like a visual,
I knew
a
the
visual,
tools.
a visual
Like-
designer.
Wow.
Visual UX designer. I was hired on as a company. Did the HTML, built the front ends as well,
Got
but
it.
mainly I was the designer. And
And
we
then
had a
they
rock
told
star.
you can't design everything with HTML tables.
Yeah.
Yeah, more than once, and you can actually.
And you
That's a big
can.
fat
I
lie.
agree. I
So,
agree.
yeah. So exactly.
I still.
yeah.
This is basically my level of HTML layout.
I'm moving between absolute and I'm still static, absolute, and relative.
tables.
And relative. I mean, flex is out of
Yeah,
my.
and see, you say something like flex, and I
yeah.
just,
No, exactly.
I was trying to
Exactly.
build something the other day.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank God for ChatGPT. I mean, really honestly, that's the only way I'm ever going to get
Yeah.
something right. But so it'd be interesting here is I was designing for him, and then our developer left. He quit. And so they asked me, what do we need? I said, you need to go out and find a rock star developer. We were doing .NET, C# at the time.
Okay.
And we were doing, Razor backend. It's again dating myself and or templates, and so they went out, and I was on vacation, and they went out and they hired a rockstar designer, and I was like, and they called me and said, "Hey, you're the new developer."
Nice.
So that's when I learned to develop, and so I crash coursed in C#, in HTML, CSS, all those things, and did that for quite a while. But I fell in love with the back end. I really did. I fell in love with building that. Not necessarily C#, although I actually really like C#. It's very powerful.
It's an amazing language.
Just ran over my head most of the time. I really like the non-compiled, Node or Python, that kind of thing. But I was doing that for a long time. I've been a software architect. I've worked for the startups. I've done the quintessential failed startup, and so that's great for me, and so it's good learning lesson. My wife loved that. Hope we do that again, and so I ended up doing. I ended up getting into working different jobs, but I missed the speaking. I really missed it. So I kind of found I worked for Rackspace for a while as their AWS evangelist for Rackspace, and that was a blend of speaking and tech. It was a beautiful blend. I really liked it. But then that's when I heard of serverless. I was, when the day they announced serverless, I remember staring at the screen and go, I don't know why you do it any other way. And so I started. And here's the problem with serverless. You can't no, it's better now. There's tons of things, but there's monetizing serverless as an infrastructure company becomes problematic because developers quickly go, I got this. I have the CDK. I have the same. I don't, and so when they would have me come in and talk to customers, like, you could do this on serverless a lot easier. and they were very customer first companies. So it'd be like, that's great, Eric. Maybe not always go to serverless, right? But it's made, a lot of sense. So when Chris Munns opened up the spot for my current position, I went for it, and that's kind of that's the shorter, believe it or not, that's the abridged version of my journey to where I'm at.
And
now.
how long have you been at AWS?
5 years in
5
October.
years.
I get my orange badge in October.
Okay.
Yeah. How long were you at AWS?
7 years.
Oh, 7 years.
When I left, I was like, I've been here for 5 years. And then after I left, I calculated.
Really?
And I realized I was there for 7 years.
Yeah.
And something's like,
Nice.
wait. So I was like, time flies. It was a great journey. I really enjoyed it. And it's such a
It's a good company to work for.
dynamic environment. I worked for Microsoft before.
Okay.
But AWS was very different energy, lots of creativity, lots of innovation, lots of customer, interaction, especially with open source and the CDK and
And that's it's funny because we say this, and I'm not trying to do a pitch for AWS on this, but or I am either way. But it's interesting. They say, and Elad, you can probably back me up on this. So much of what we build is customer driven because we, whoa, that's a pain point. Let's see if we can't, and so much of what we build is customer driven, and I love that. I absolutely love it. So,
agreed. So did you think of did you have some time to think about Winglang after our conversation?
Yeah, I've heard of it. I'll be very honest. I love Wing. I love the idea. Obviously, y'all were on the show. We had several others. I don't know if I'm allowed to say it, but we had Amped on the show. I love the space I think it's everybody knows me as the Sam guy. I mean, I have literally only one now, but for a long time I had 2 squirrel costumes in our closet. Long story on why I have 2, and I can get my wife down there.
I don't want to know. I don't want to.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's probably best not to. But I will tell you that last Halloween. Last Halloween, we went as Mr. and Mrs. Squirrel for
really?
with our kids. So yeah, because we had both. But everybody, and I love Sam. The way Sam works, the way CDK works, I feel it's really good. So I'll never down on Sam. But I love where this is headed. And Eli, you and I have talked about this a lot, and I think you said it, or no, Eli, I think you coined it. And now I'm using my American accent, so I'm sure I said your name wrong.
Yeah,
Said it perfectly.
Said it pretty good. Said it pretty good, man.
Well, I am, I'm multicultural, but it's all my Hebrew training. So, I love the idea, and I actually just tweeted a little. It's like monolithic multi or microservice EDA distributed application out. Yeah,
right.
And I think that's where. And I know I've heard you say this, and I've said the same thing. And the idea of distributed apps are hard in general.
Right.
I think AWS has done a phenomenal job of making distributed apps graspable, reachable, doable by the common developer, and not you don't have to be the only 3 of people in the world understand it. Right. So I think we've done a great job. But part of that, there's a learning curve in understanding how much of the architecture takes over time, and how many times am I leaving the code to set up the architecture? And so there's a knowledge, again, like I said, there's a learning curve in going, okay, where does the code stop? Where does the architecture start, or vice versa? Right. And what y'all are doing in this space, whether y'all, Amped, Clotho, I think there's several now that are coming out. Right. You're saying, we want to keep it in code, but not lose the advantage of what we're taking on serverless. Right. I know there are some folks who go, it's hard. I'm just going to go back to a container, or I'm going to go back to an EC2. Yeah. And that's not the right answer, right? So we
kind
need
of like
to
giving up.
Where we go,
it's kind of like giving up, right? And saying we fail. Yeah. We're failing with the at the design time, so we're going to pay at runtime, right?
Yeah. And some of that is, if developing were easy, everybody would do it, right? There is, and we love to bring it and make it easier, no code, low code, and all those things. But there has to be, there's for instance, when I describe step functions in like the Workflow Studio, which is phenomenal, right? The Workflow Studio is amazing. And we actually took this all over the Middle East. And so I had people coming up, so I don't even need to be a developer, right? It's like, yeah, you still need to be a developer. You still need to have an understanding of workflows and code and scaling and all those things. And that doesn't change with Wing or this space. But it makes it brings that ability to build it into a single place, single screen, and kind of lets the head kind of watch it linearly,
Right. Yeah.
So,
and I think in the I think it's a lot about the tooling, right? Like I feel like having a single compiler that has the full picture is the foundation of the solution. At least in our in how Wing is approaching it. It's like the idea of a compiler is to take different pieces of your application and link them together in a strongly typed, in a strong way.
I mean, I think that's. I mean. But we are also standing on the shoulder of giants. We also have, we rely on OpenTelemetry for distributed tracing. To make sure that all those pieces talk together in a way that is comparable, we need OpenTelemetry. And the fact that we can have a counter that's based on DynamoDB,
of course,
we need DynamoDB for this. So the compiler is what wraps all of that. I mean, the fact that the language is open source and the ecosystem is open allows you to basically kind of use the entire ecosystem and the
Which
compiler
is-
is kind of the
Which is true, by the way, for any compiler, and
Right,
you know,
right.
in any scenario, right?
Right.
Like when a compiler has an atomic counter in your operating system,
Right.
it uses the CPU's capability to
Exactly.
implement an atomic counter. It's not implementing the atomic counter
Right.
in the language, right?
right.
So it's all about creating the right layer
Yeah.
of abstraction that you can build in a safe way, right?
Right.
And make sure that you can like find all the problems as early as possible, but then enjoy the distributed nature of the system. And
yeah, awesome.
So I'm sorry, I got all excited. So
That's a good one.
normally, and here's my take on compilers, or not compilers. Let's say emulator. Okay, so because I know y'all have an emulator compiler and an emulator runs locally. Normally, and there are several presentations in the wild where I'm like, do not use emulators, or that's not what I'm saying. I don't prefer emulators, which in my head I'm saying do not use emulators,
Okay.
right? But in my head, however, so SAM, we have an emulator, right? We run SAM local,
Right.
and in fact, just a little SAM plug for those of you who don't know, we just made it so that you can do the custom authorizer. You can actually use custom authorizer in local SAM to test your authorization, which has been a big ask. So thank you for giving me 7 seconds of your show to do that plug. But
Anytime.
and there's no stopping me now. So what was that? but the idea for me, the idea of an emulator. And your compiler emulator is all kind of built in, or not, or it's not the same, but it works together. The idea of an emulator is sanity checks to make sure just basic code is working right. It's a sanity check to quickly go, okay, and was watching the demo where you were showing the Redis, things like that. Everything, and what y'all are doing, and correct me if I'm wrong, I'm making some assumptions here, but you're basically you're doing root level functionality. Regardless of where you are, this is how this should function.
Exactly.
Whether you're on AWS, Azure, Google, whatever.
Exactly.
And so and that's, see, to me, I think that's the perfect use of an emulator, right? So you throw that in there, and then when I'm ready to test the cloud specific and get into the, is the auth right? Are these settings right? Then I need to get to the cloud as quick as I can.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's and that's one I would ask you this question: are y'all looking at doing a quick update of any sort?
on the cloud,
Yeah. So if I build, are you looking at doing like a SAM sync
Yeah.
idea or a CDK sync? Okay.
by the way,
That's
how is
super
it called in
exciting
the
to hear.
CDK? It's called something else.
I don't know. I can't spell CDK.
Uh,
That's not true. I use
because
the CDK.
Anecdotally, we actually had a pretty big discussion
Okay.
between the CDK team and the SAM team when we both released this feature, and the SAM team wanted to call it sync,
Okay.
and we were like,
Yeah.
it doesn't, the mental model doesn't make sense for the CDK, and so eventually we called it
Sound.
Yeah, it's a different
hot
name.
reloading or
Okay.
something like that,
Okay.
or
Yeah, hot load or something like that.
like that.
Yeah.
That was an interesting, but it was also interesting to see like how these two teams were basically getting to the point where they need to like implement this feature at the same time, and the Amazon situation where there's,
Yeah.
but so to your, I haven't answered your question because the answer is no.
Nope.
No.
We're not going to support that.
Interesting. Okay.
And
I would even say that I wouldn't call our local simulator an emulator, because in a way
emulator.
an emulator. I think it's an implementation of the portable cloud, basically. I mean,
Okay.
so one implementation of the portable cloud is AWS. I mean, I mean, we have an adapter, basically, kind of. We have an adapter between AWS to our portable cloud, because we have a bucket, we have API gateway, we have PubSub or topics, Lambda, Q. We're gonna have, you mentioned Fargate, so we're gonna have some ways to run containers, and now we need to implement this for all the cloud provider. One of them is
the local machine,
simulator.
and it's not even a simulator in a
Right.
sense, right? Like
Right.
it's literally a local implementation of your application.
Yeah.
And the reason it makes sense in the architecture of Wing is that the code that you're writing it against that layer. You're not writing it against
Yes.
the AWS API.
Right.
So
Right,
contrary to amazing solutions like local stack, for example,
exactly.
which is attempting to completely mimic the AWS
Right.
implementation in the local environment, we don't have that need. Because, like you said, you have a functional unit called a bucket, and it has a specific function in your application, and it has a contract with your application. So you can get a file, put a file, list the files, right? Like there's a bunch of APIs that it supports, and as long as I'm implementing that contract, it's a bucket as far as you're concerned, right? Like you don't care if it's a Dropbox bucket or an S3 bucket or a local file system.
Yeah.
And that's a big challenge. We know that it's a...
I wanted to say that the other side of the coin is it basically relies on the fact that we will be able to kind of provide an abstraction that will be able to that will work for all the
carry
people.
over.
It will carry over. I mean, that's the other side of the coin. I mean, we need to prove basically. I mean, that people will be able to write software that uses this abstraction. And it's not going to fail. Yeah. That's because we haven't done this yet. It's not proven. And that's the other side. I mean, the fact that an Azure bucket and a GCP bucket and an S3 bucket, the fact we're saying that they all behave the same, that's easy. Function, okay, that's easy. A queue, now there's FIFO and there's complexity there.
And by the way, I have to say that the value proposition, and I know that you're kind of cringing a little bit, the value proposition of like porting your cloud application across providers is actually not one of the primary things that we're trying to solve.
I understand.
Like for us, it's almost a side effect of the simulator requirement, right?
Yeah.
Like because for me, this is the irresistible thing, right? Like the ability to actually iterate locally on my full cloud application with millisecond iteration cycle is something that I won't be able to go back from.
Bringing back the flow.
And go back to this flow that you've been talking about, right?
So where do you... This quickly turned into me interviewing you. All right, there it is. Sorry. Just kidding. So how do you draw the line then and yeah, there's obviously similarities, but there are differences. How do you draw the line in your simulator? I'm willing to call it that. Your C emulator. No, I'm just kidding. Your simulator. Philosophically or what's your methodology? I'm trying to use words that I never use. There they are. How do you decide we don't need to support that locally? That can be tested in the cloud. And is there a line?
Yeah.
Is it, well, we just haven't gotten to it yet, or is there a philosophy about no? That can be tested in the cloud. That's a very specific idea.
A classic example for me is Kinesis. Kinesis. Sorry. I mean, I'm not that familiar with the kind of the API, the technology, but I kind of feel like we're not going to be able to basically create an abstraction on top of it that will run on all the clouds and run on the simulator. And then we're going to provide, it's not going to be part of kind of the cloud kind of namespace. You'll be able to use it, of course. There will be different kind of emulators or for Kinesis on your local host. And maybe we're going to proxy the events to, I mean, we're going to proxy kind of the API calls to Kinesis running on the cloud. But there's some things that are just kind of unique. I mean, BigQuery is unique. There's a lot of unique stuff on the cloud. And I think that's where the line is going to be drawn in many cases.
Yeah, I thought that Eric's question was about, let's say, a bucket.
The API of a bucket.
Right.
Okay, interesting.
I mean, this is also interesting.
Okay.
That's service level.
So
yeah, I like that.
What AI was basically saying, and I think it's not clear.
I don't think you say his name right, but
I think it's not clear from what we've been talking about is that you could actually use any cloud resource in Wing.
Right.
And so if you want to use Kinesis or if you want to use AWS RoboMaker in your application, then you can just import the AWS RoboMaker provider and do new AWS RoboMaker. And when you compile this to AWS, it'll have an AWS RoboMaker resource and you can interact with it and you can do whatever you want with it. And we will also give you a way to provide the local implementation for this RoboMaker.
Either mocking or
either
proxy.
through mocking or through proxying to the real cloud.
Okay.
And you could publish it as a library. And so I could publish a library
Okay.
called Wing RoboMaker.
Right.
And the Wing RoboMaker library would have both the AWS implementation and the local implementation. And then people can use it, for their own purposes.
That's pretty slick.
And so
That's
that's
pretty
what
slick.
Eyal was saying, about the surface area.
Okay,
like
gotcha.
we're not stupid to think that you could build everything with 20 resources, right? Like the whole beauty of the cloud is its diversity and richness and choice, and Wing is designed to support that.
Right.
So that's one. I think that's one aspect, and we're still, early in exploring that developer experience exactly. And
Right.
but to your question, Eric, about which capabilities of a bucket we're exposing as part of the cloud API, and which ones are actually cloud specific, provider specific, let's call it. The litmus test that we're using is functional versus non-functional. It's like, is this something that an application developer, does this impact the functionality of the application? And so the canonic example is encryption, right? Encryption.
Sure. Yeah.
The application doesn't give a fuck if something is encrypted or not, right? Like it's just, just put the file here. Right? But then when you go and you deploy it to a cloud provider, then you care if it's encrypted, right? Because you have some regulatory requirements, because you have some policies, right? Whatever, right? This is fun when you're not in AWS. You can say whatever you want on Twitch.
Yeah, well, that's exactly. I was like, oh, hey, oh no, wait, I'm not on your screen. Okay.
I saw your face. I saw your face. And so this is the litmus test we're using.
Nice.
We're not sure exactly how much water it'll hold over time.
Yeah.
But the other important aspect of it is, and I think we mentioned it in your show, but I'm not sure, is what we call Wing plugins.
Right.
And Wing plugins are basically things that you can connect to your compiler and apply target-specific customizations below the abstraction.
Right.
And that's happening based on the specific provider that you're targeting. And so if I'm compiling to AWS, I can create a plugin that makes sure that all the buckets are encrypted.
Exactly.
Or that applies HIPAA compliance across my entire application. So the idea is that you can actually control both sides of the abstraction. One side is the application, the other side is the infrastructure, the non-functional aspects.
It's a lot about the separation of concerns. These are two different concerns, and we don't want. A lot of times it's operations or DevOps and engineers, and or software developers, and we don't want the software developer to be blocked by the DevOps, and we don't want the DevOps people that are doing this to be blocked. So it's two different things. So I'm writing the fact that I need to write into a bucket, read from a bucket, and someone else makes sure that this bucket is versioned and there's backups and it's multiple regions. It's two different things, and these are the policies.
Yeah. Which, by the way, Eric, I think is a bit of somewhat of a blind spot for AWS. In hindsight, maybe from outside I can see it a little bit, because when you work at AWS, everybody's doing everything, right? Like an engineer, an SDE, it owns the entire stack, right? They own the application and they own the VPC.
That's the two pizza team, right?
The two pizza team, the full stack mentality, which as
full ownership.
For me, it was obviously the right place. But if you look at the industry, you look at like financial institutions, you look at application developers, that's not the natural, division, right? Like they definitely hit, and I think AWS is struggling somewhat to like apply these models across the industry, and there's a bit of a, we feel that Wing could be a good way for companies that don't have that mentality to adopt the cloud and leverage it way more effectively than they're doing today. Because today the reality is that they're shoving their application developers to the corner, right? Like they're telling them, okay, put your code over here in this repository, and we'll deploy it to your Lambda function or to your container, and we'll take care of everything.
Yeah.
And so they're not really leveraging the cloud, right? Like they're giving up on the cloud in a
Right.
sense, right?
Yeah. Well, and I would say that yeah, what you're saying is valid. What we see is you're talking to companies,
Right.
not necessarily AWS, but you're talking companies that are trying to do governance.
Yeah, totally.
A lot of times, and yeah, I've sat with FinOp companies,
Right.
specifically FinOp. I mean, in the banking, where you're right. It is. Look, you write a little bit of code, and we'll put it in the Lambda for you. We'll put it in the
Right.
Lambda function. Sorry, Chris Munns, and we'll do whatever. Or you can't use this service, or you can use this features of this service, that kind of stuff. And I agree with you, and you're right. Companies need help understanding how to do that. And while we have some tools in place, obviously the tools you have will make use of those tools also.
Of course.
Yeah, that's cool.
and
That's
so
what
yeah,
Yal was saying earlier. Yeah.
Yeah. So no, and I think that's brilliant. If you got all your customers, see, that's the other thing we see in a lot of companies. I remember when I first came to Rackspace,
Okay.
it was like this. It was like, well, I have this idea. I'm going to build this. What language, what framework stuff do I have to use? Yeah, just use whatever. What?
Really?
What? And I get that from a developer standpoint. It's like, all right, I use my favorite language,
Yeah.
And so, but from a governance standpoint, that becomes language, maybe not as much, although that's an issue, but architecture
Right.
and pre-built blocks,
Right.
that becomes a nightmare. So
Right.
yeah, I can definitely see an advantage of this it being very powerful.
Yeah. But
what's
also languages, kind of pipelines. I mean, all of this kind of eventually gets. I mean,
Yeah.
companies want to consolidate these things because that's
Yeah.
it's a real issue. I think we're kind of running out of time. I think it's kind of moved really, really fast.
Are we?
Yeah,
All
I
right.
think. I mean,
I have a lot more to say, but okay.
yeah, I too.
I'm good.
I mean, I kind
We'll
of feel
have
like
you again, of course.
I kind of feel like
I'd love it.
this show has kind of a tradition that there's one item that we never touch in the. There's always one item that we never
get to.
and we're not going to get to the last
What was
item.
it? What was the last?
We want to go with
Oh,
Shai on the Q&A on the Reddit. We have a nice.
Sorry, Shai.
Yeah, sorry, Shai.
There was a pretty heated Reddit thread on Wing this week, so
Yeah.
we were thinking it would be cool to go over it and answer some questions and try to explain why the fuck do you think new programming language is the right solution to these problems?
Maybe we should record
yeah.
TikTok videos on this.
Well, go watch my show. This isn't a shameless plug, although it is. But the show I asked you that. We talked about that
Right.
a little bit on the why, because that is a good question
That's a
on
great
why do
question,
the other
of
language.
course.
That's a great question.
Yeah.
That's,
I know when y'all are off air, you can be like Eric would never shut up, Shy. So he's the reason we couldn't come on, and that's fair. If you want to do that, it's totally
that's
fine.
exactly
Throw
what
me
we
into the
do.
bus.
I mean, it's
Wouldn't be the first
definitely.
time. So, all right, I have one more question. If you have a second,
Yeah, we do.
So, when do you think? And this is it's an abstract question. When do you think Wing will be usable in like a beta
level.
environment? Yeah, beta
do you
level.
have a suspicion that there are bugs in Wing that won't let you use?
I have. Let's talk about my first bug. I mean, I have fixed a bug for you all. If you remember, I submitted a PR and did the whole thing, and I fixed some spelling issues on the.
You also discovered a
one of
bunch.
the documents.
You also ran into like two blocking issues.
I did just the other day. Yeah, I was trying it out. I was revisiting. What I do is I go in and come back periodically to see how far along it is. And when I heard the API coming out, and I know we can't talk about, but time wise, you can just tell me to shut up. But I was super excited to see the API implementation. That's obviously a big one.
Yeah.
API.
Yeah.
How do we get to it? How do we use this? An API is a huge one. Did y'all fix the C emulator problem?
Of course.
It's fixed.
All right, good. Okay,
Just,
of course.
Yeah. Now
So-
the next time it's going to be
We
a whole new bug.
actually Shai was posting on our Slack is like a P0 bug. You know
Right.
what a P like? It's a Sev2. It's like an AWS
Yeah.
Sev2 event. It's like
Yeah.
all hands on deck.
Yeah.
Reverting all the PRs.
Right.
That,
The next one.
Eric Johnson, baby,
exactly.
right there.
You're
it
not
wasn't
gonna,
because of you, by the way. It wasn't because of you. It was
No,
just like,
but I called it out.
Yeah, you
I'm
called
taking
it out.
credit.
Totally,
I'm proud of that. Yeah.
So the next time it's going to be a whole new
The
bug.
right channels.
So, well, to your
What's that?
to your question about beta.
Yeah.
Yeah. We don't know exactly, and you know how it works with software. It's ready when it's ready, and it takes time to kind of bake. There's this aspect of like organic baking. We are intentionally trying to stop developing features,
Right.
and move towards like quality, stability,
Right.
performance.
Right.
So we are definitely like interested in releasing beta
Right.
soon, right?
Yeah.
As soon as we can. We think that from a surface area perspective, there's like enough to kind of like show what we're trying to do and like kind of, you know, sketch the boundaries of and capabilities of what Wing is able to do.
CMVP, yeah.
But I think that, you know, before it's like stable enough and performant and feels like it's a, you know, a solid piece of engineering, it won't be ready. But, you know, as I said, we're actually like intentionally trying to like shift gears
Right.
and
Right. We're exactly right now in the shifting gear where we said this is the content is I don't want to repeat a lot. I mean, we're freezing the content, and now we're making sure that the quality is solid, and the first time user experience for people that are onboarding Wing will be kind of delightful. So that's that. And once we get to a point where we're saying this is good enough, then we're gonna say it's beta time, and
we'll call you.
We'll
Call
call you.
And also, of course,
Oh, I'm following along. I'm following along.
continue
Yeah,
to
yeah.
yell,
I'm
to yell anytime you see something at any level. By the way, on the website, on the docs,
Okay.
on the on social. You know,
Yeah,
we're
definitely.
still kind of alpha in every aspect of
in
the.
every aspect. We are.
Here's my one piece of feedback,
Go ahead.
and then I'll shut up. Is documentation, things like that. Your documentation is really well thought out, read out, but it's kind of shoots at people smarter than me.
Okay.
There are words in
Interesting.
it. It's like I don't know what that means.
Oh, this is a good
and
feedback.
so I'm a pretty average developer, so I would really encourage you to more
Interesting.
examples.
Yeah.
Okay.
I learned by looking on, oh, okay, that's how that code works,
Nice.
and things like that, and then I go look up the words I don't understand, you know, things like that. But I would really encourage you to write to not change what you've got, but add to it
Got
in a
it.
way that.
Awesome.
So, all right, now that we've gone through all the. Here's the principle and everything behind it. Here's an example of what we mean.
Awesome.
And that's how I learn like crazy.
Yeah.
Everything I've learned
awesome,
is just
awesome
by
That's
feedback.
great
doing
feedback.
so.
That's
Yeah.
great feedback. So Elad needs
that
to
would be my
stop
feedback.
writing the documentation. He's just too smart to write documentation. That's
I'm not.
Yeah,
Too
yeah,
smart, I'm
it's
just like
like-
too falsan.
philosophical. Yeah. Okay, Eric.
Yeah.
Thank you
so much.
thank you for joining.
Thanks
Thank you
for having me.
for your
Appreciate
time
it,
here.
gentlemen.
And thank you for people watching and for this show and
Yeah.
we'll see you in 2 weeks, right? That's what we're doing. Bye, Eric.
Bye, my
Sounds
man.
good.
See you
Bye,
later.
all.
Bye, Wingly.